Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Citadel, Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break them down. First and foremost, we take a step back and learn about Nadia and Mason's past. What I thought was so interesting, though, is that when first asked about it, Nadia lies and says that, like, oh, her and Mason didn't really know each other that well. But for him, it's like, I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember my family's name. I couldn't remember my own name. Yet the only thing I could remember was you, at least your face. Like, the fact of the matter is, we must have meant something. But she was like, yeah, we had a brief thing, but it was kind of nothing. A flash in the pan or whatever. But I'm like, why are you lying? I mean, initially, I'm thinking maybe it's because she found out he was married. Like, if she hadn't found out he was married, would that have changed things? I don't know. I mean, also adding insult to injury, it's also the thing of, also, they had a kid. I mean, that obviously him and Abby have a daughter together. So I wonder if all that kind of influenced her wanting to push him away, where it's like, right, like, you're living a life away from me and my complications. Like, I guess for her, it's like, you kind of have an out of all of this. I mean, who knows if they ever, like, talked about ever wanting out of it. Like, they believe themselves to be doing the greater good, so I don't know if they'd ever get to the point where they're like, yeah, I want to hang this up. Because she's been doing this spy thing for at least 7 years before they lost their memories, and for him, we have no idea, because we learn... I mean, first and foremost, we learn a lot of interesting things about Citadel, that it is a... I guess you can make the argument there's some nepotism there to some extent, where it's like her mom was a Citadel agent, so it is something that kind of gets passed down in bloodlines and stuff. So I wonder, is it an extent, like, at least to some extent, there's a bloodline element to it. But I'm curious, is it a thing of just because your parent could be a Citadel agent and then eventually you could get brought up in it, or it could be a thing of you have no direct connection to Citadel. Because I was thinking, like, maybe they pick random agents from different agencies, because it does seem like that is the case, because Mason did ask her, like, oh, did you come from MI6? So once again, I know that the organization came about because over 100 years ago they pulled agents from different agency, but I didn't know if they were still doing that, or whether it's like, so it seems like it's a combination of, it's a bloodline thing, but also they probably still do, like, pick out some top tier people from different organizations, which begs the question, where did Mason come from before he joined? Because once again, Nadia is a legacy in this, so, because her mom didn't talk about her dad, so he might have just been a regular guy, or maybe he had some governmental job. But Mason's mom, he doesn't have a mom. Well, I mean, he does, but he doesn't know who she is. So either he was kind of like abandoned at a young age, like either she was out of his life after he was born, so maybe he only grew up knowing his dad and not his mom, or, I mean, I'd assume at this point in time his dad's also dead too, or maybe, like, his mom was only biological family he had, she abandoned him, so maybe he grew up in foster care type of situation. Still a lot of question marks in that regard. But going back, we kind of get to look at Citadel's, like, infrastructure a little bit. We get introduced to Carter, which last episode Bernard talked about Carter like he was, it made it sound like Carter was the last one with the case. It's like, yeah, like, let's make sure that Carter's sacrifice wasn't in vain. So Bernard assumed, I guess, in all this time that Carter was dead, just like maybe Nadia and Mason. Once again, he keeps a lot of stuff close to the vest. Like, it's at this point, I mean, that's any spy crap stuff. We don't know who knows what when. So when did he know that Mason was still alive? When did he know that Nadia was alive? He made it seem like, hey, Mason, I think Nadia's dead, because I haven't been able to get in contact with her. But it's like, you know that you wouldn't be able to, because you know you wiped her memory. So it has to be complete another BS, because I didn't even think about that last episode. Of course, like, right, he did say, like, oh, I think she said, it's like, why would you think that? Because she hasn't gotten in contact in those 8 years. It's like, you know her memory was wiped. You know that because you set it in motion. You caused the backstop. You activated it. Either way, we go back 10 years, and this is actually the first mission that Mason and Nadia worked on together. Granted, they were working on it separately. She was already undercover. He was to go and infiltrate a place and steal like a virus that could kill a lot of people. But like I said, we learned a little bit of dynamics. We learned about Grace, which I can only assume she's dead now. She was kind of like their boss. Mason and Bernard had their relationship. Like, it's like, oh, like, I don't want to steal Grace's thunder, so I'll give you a little background on, like, the operation. Just don't let her know. Act like super surprised when she brings it all up. And then partway through her explaining things, he's a complete and utter dick, and Mason just goes, like, through everything and then immediately throws Bernard under the bus. But I love that it's like, Mason's saying something and Bernard makes a reference. He's like, oh, you're she's only in this for 2 seconds and you already interrupting her, like, insert the two names, and everyone pauses. I was like, oh, no one gets the reference, do they? Because I didn't get the reference until he's like, oh yeah, the two Muppets. I was like, oh, is that their name? I can only assume it's the Muppets that talk the mad shit, the ones that are like always like the older Muppets. I'm like, I've never known those guys' names. I always just know them as the old guys that talk mad shit. That's just always how I've known them. I'm not well versed enough in the Muppets. I know Kermit, Gonzo, Animal, and Miss Piggy. Was it Beaker? Beaker might be the only other one I know amongst the Muppets. Either way, tangents and all that aside, cards were pretty stacked against Mason in that operation. To be fair, he kind of probably pulled the trigger on things. I mean, he probably didn't go about things as well as he should have, because it's like, yeah, he ended up going like way ahead of schedule, literally blowing the door off the place, escaping, and it turns into a shootout, then an escape down the mountain. Very like James Bond-esque. Also, the freaking skis in the boot. Okay, I mean, once again, I know there's a heavy science fictional angle, or like there's an element of science fiction to this with like the technology and stuff that they have access to, but going down the slope, getting shot at, surrounded by vehicles, getting saved by Nadia at the last second, and walking away with all the injuries. Oh, cool. Broken ribs, some internal bleeding. Oh man, that lung is not looking too good. It's like barely making it through, barely escaping, but trying to make it seem like to Nadia, like, oh, calling her like a rookie, but she's been at this for a while. It's also interesting to know that they only worked together for 2 years. But, I mean, hey, a lot can happen in 2 years. A lot of missions, a lot of, times in the bed together, I mean, because it seemed like at the bare minimum, at most, we know it's like 2 weeks before they got together. There was already a little flirtation in their first meeting. But, yeah, like 2 weeks later, we saw them, like, bang it out. I think that was in Paris. So that didn't take long. So they had their, I guess, on and off again thing for the next year plus, near 2 years, which is interesting. But also, like, I would have, in my head, I would have thought they would have been working together even longer than what they were. But I guess it's kind of a little bit of that torn affair of like, I guess things happen, feelings got real, but neither one of them really pulled the trigger. Maybe one, in fact, failed. I mean, we don't know if that's because Nadia's got some secrets of her own. We learned that last episode, but we don't know to what extent. Obviously, this episode hints at what some of those secrets are, but even then, once again, we don't know what's true. We don't know what we don't know. What's real, what's a lie. Obviously, it's like, oh, the whole element of, can I trust you? Of course. Can I trust you? Always. And is that what they were both talking about when they said, I lied to, when they were saying that to each other on the train? They're like, oh, can you trust me? Like, is that what they lied to each other about? Something else? Maybe that's what Nadia was referencing, but maybe Mason was referencing kind of like a, once again, like there has to be, some of that has to be correlated to, I lied about how I feel about you or whatever, that I've kind of gotten over you. Like maybe, I feel like that's probably more so on Mason's side, and maybe Nadia's side is like, I lied about something else, or maybe it's a little bit of everything. Because present day, Nadia ended up sending a message to someone, and it was something about, obviously, Valencia being kind of a burned situation. So that's why I'm like, that has to be once again, it was like, the name Asha. So I'm assuming this has some correlation, because once again, we don't know what Nadia's circumstances were like in these past 8 years. Like, it's just like, you found her in Spain, but it's like, beyond that, you don't know, like, yeah, this might have been her cover, but maybe this person, potentially Asha, brought her into the fold and was like, all right, we're gonna, like, I'm not gonna reveal who you really are, but I'm gonna keep your cover by you doing what you're meant to do. Maybe this has something to do with the reveal later on that she's potentially the one that sold out Citadel. Maybe she had her reasons. Maybe someone she cares about was her, because it's like they were asking about some kind of package. She did kind of seem stressed about like responding to the email. She also made sure that it was in a private type of situation where no one could read it. I mean, obviously it's not just like Mason you're trying to hide this from. You're trying to hide this securely from anyone that might be watching, like Manticore, for example. Some other corrections in this episode. The fact is, Bernard and Joe do have a daughter together. Like I said, it felt weird that we never saw her in like episode 1 or 2, but then we see her this episode because she's hanging with Hendrix. I was like, okay, so I was completely wrong in some capacities about the Abby thing, which we'll get to in a second. But I was like, oh, okay, so you really do have a daughter. I was like, that was weird. I just thought it was interesting. We never actually got to see her. It does seem like the person they were referencing was Abby, but I wonder how much their daughter, I think her name's like Valeria, how much she actually knows about things, because she even has a knife. She's even telling Hendrix, like, I'll teach you how to use it. So their daughter must know enough that's probably why they had her hang around Hendrix. It's like, right, for you to be there to kind of give her the lay of the land to kind of potentially help her out, maybe. So I was one of my theories last episode was kind of making it, could like Bernard and Joe's daughter actually be Abby? But another theory I thrown out there last episode, I was like, well, we never found out how Abby and Mason met, and obviously Joe asked about that, and she's like, yeah, I was in a car accident 9 years ago. I was like, oh boy. And she's like, yeah, and that was kind of suffer brain trauma, so I don't remember anything. And the program that she went into to kind of help with her memory therapy was the same one Mason was in. I was like, you're a Citadel agent. Like, I that was one of my guesses, wondering, like, once again, why they had, one of my guesses for that was like, why they were like, we have to tell her? But it's like, Joe was like, no, because then Mason's going to find out what you did. So, like, did he orchestrate that? Was that meant to keep them both hidden? That's why I'm like, how much of a play did, like, Bernard have in all of this? Like, it feels too, like, you hold a lot of the pieces, but I don't know why you're playing the game the way you are. I don't know if it's a situation of you were ordered to play it that way, or, like, once again, it just comes down to who knew what when. And then we find out even more about Abby when we find out her real name. What's it? Burrell? I think it's the character's name. I'm butchering it. But apparently she has a connection to Anders. And Anders, like she was someone that he loves, which is also even more tragic. The fact is that she's married to Mason. That's got to cut even more, because both of them have beef with him. Because so that's why I was also like, that's what I was so confused by last episode, because I was like, no, like the other twin didn't die. It's like, right, he's there, so it's a thing of they have to be legit. No, because they have to be legit twins, because it was shown on camera of them talking to each other, and even Bernard referred to them as the twins. So I was about to say, because for a second I was like, wait, could it be like they're both the same person, but it's represented visually as them being two separate people, but in actuality they're the same person? That's what I was kind of wondering, but I don't think that's the case. They are twins. But the fact is, he made a whole point last episode about Mason killing his brother. So I'm like, oh, like, was there an unrelated? Was there a third? Like, were they triplets, or was it just did they have another sibling that maybe Mason's responsible for killing? I don't know. We also learn a little bit more about Dahlia and Bernard's connection. So it predates their respective organizations that they work for now, I guess. I guess they knew each other back in the day. They were both potentially recruited from the UN. I guess that's supposed to be because like she references her. They reference. He was like, yeah, I knew back in even in back in your UN days, I knew you were a bit of a sociopath. So, but once again, she harkens back to the fact is that Citadel is not what you believe it to be. You think yourselves the good in this world, but it's like big spies. I guess for her, it's like there is no such thing as being a good as a spy because everything you do is at the benefit of somebody else, whether or not you realize it or not. Maybe it's kind of implying you thought Citadel was doing good, but you were lining someone else's pocket and helping them along the way. It's like, well, it's not like, let's not mince words. And Manticore seems like they're doing their own thing too, but once again, maybe it's like they're the heroes and Citadel's actually the villains. You've been playing the wrong side of this entire time, and you've just been so far up this Citadel so far down this Citadel rabbit hole that you're completely blind to what's really going on around you. So I think that also adds a little irony to Bernard telling Anders at the end, what you don't know is like everything you know is a lie. So that's why I'm wondering, were they previous Citadel members or something, considering Bernard and Anders know each other like that? Is it a thing of because of the whole Burrell thing? Because he's like, yeah, Citadel lied to you. So maybe he was a Citadel agent that went rogue, or I don't know. We also found out about Carter that it seems like he resisted for a while, but eventually Dahlia broke him. And we don't know if did she kill him after he gave her what she wanted? Because they have access to the system that allows them, that the Citadel had to track where all the nuclear weapons are. They just don't have access to the system. That's why they need Bernard, the person who made the system, to give them the password. But he refuses and gets tortured. Whether that's having his teeth ripped out, his wife threatened because they know exactly where her, Abby, and both of their daughters are, because they tracked him the moment he hit the New York headquarters or whatever. We've been backtracking you with every camera, so we know you're in Wyoming, and we narrowed it down to a small, was it like Cheyenne specifically, but it's only a matter of time before we take it even further and even find out more specifically of where they're located. Shifting gears a little bit back to the Abby situation, I am curious, is it kind of just a jealousy thing or something else when he brings up, yeah, I found that other agent, Nadia, and she's like, yeah, her name's Nadia. It's like, yeah, because you very specifically told Abby in episode 2 that you were going to find this other agent. You referred to them as a they, and now you're like, oh, there's a she. It's like, yeah, her name's Nadia. It's like, well, does she know anything about Mason? It's like, no, doesn't seem like they were close. And I guess it's like, right, your husband's out there doing all this dangerous stuff, so you're worried about him. You want him to be able to come home. And maybe you're kind of worried that, hey, someone from his past will pull him back and maybe kind of end up leaving you and Hendrix high and dry, and he'll end up leaving you behind. I mean, I can only assume she might have fragments of her memory just like Mason did. I mean, at the very least, Nadia also had that too, where she eventually was like, right, I remember your face too. But that was only at the end when he started refreshing her memory. He had already started having like memories of Nadia even before like learning her real name from Bernard and even seeing her face. So Nadia wanted to kind of make a clean break away from Mason, or rather Kyle, and it's like, right, go back to your family, you can keep them safe, but it's like, the moment I go back to my family, I'm going to end up drawing trouble to them and getting them killed. The only way I protect them is by ending it, so take me along with you, train me, make me into Mason Kane, but it's like, I can't. And he makes reference to some kind of white lights in a Red Sea, and it's because of the briefcase. It turns out there were some emergency messages from Carter, because I thought at first, like, you're going to be like, oh, these are Citadel agents, but the only thing was like some secret videos from Carter. He was messaging like every once in a while. He had only sent like 3, and the most recent one was from 4 months ago, and I guess that was that was like right before Dahlia got him and tortured him. So once again, we don't know if he's dead, or whether she forced him to kind of switch sides in all of this. Whether he kind of got reprogrammed type of situation, or whether they just broke him and then killed him. I don't think she specifically said what happened to him after she kind of referenced like, oh, he held out for a long time but eventually broke. Because apparently Nadia knew where Carter might be, but she's going to need access because it's at a black site that she knows about, but to get access to it they need help from this guy Balduino. He's a Portuguese crime boss, but he's not on good terms with Nadia. But apparently him and Mason were pretty close. So Kyle playing the role of Mason, having to try and pretend like he's still himself. While Balduino's son sits over there and talks all kinds of shit. Especially when Balduino kind of references Nadia as your girlfriend, so it's like, oh, so we did have history that you haven't told us about. Plus, whispers have spread around, I guess, the criminal world and spy world that Nadia's the one that sold out Citadel. And it's like that whole conversation about like, oh, you got played by a piece of ass or whatever. And I love that comeback from Mason being like, wow, I thought your dad wore a condom when he slept with whores or something. I was like, Jesus, that's a hardcore line. Obviously, he's not Mason, and he had to kind of keep up a front because he can't be cool, calm, and collected in that moment. Now finding out the person you're kind of hoping to trust turns out, wait, not only did she lie to you about what your history is, she also might be the one that sold out the organization. So even when he was like had the gun pointed at the sun and everything, his hands were shaking because he shot at people before, but I mean, obviously in the previous as Mason. Where's the name Marcus Kane come from? It's like, why does that sound familiar? I'm wondering, am I confusing it with the... I don't know where Marcus is coming from, but am I confusing it with Lucas Kane from Indigo Prophecy or Fahrenheit, the Quantic Dream game? Maybe that's what that's coming from. I feel like there's another character called like Marcus Kane, and I just don't know where I'm getting that from. I had to Google it because it was bothering me. Now, the 100... I forgot Kane's first name was Marcus. That's where it came from. I was like, jeez. I was like, why did that name sound so familiar? But it's from the TV show. I'm sure the character's in the book as well, but obviously I don't know the book. I know the TV show. But yeah, that's... Tangents and all that aside, that's where the name Marcus Kane kept coming from. Because I kept wanting to say Mason, but every time I said Mason, I'd also start thinking Marcus. Either way, God, I went on that whole tangent. My point was that Mason has killed people in the past, sure, but he hasn't done so as Kyle. Because he shot at people after Bernard got shot last episode and he was running away with the briefcase. But even then, it's like, he hasn't really taken a life, so he was kind of nervous about that situation, especially with all the guns pointed at you. So, luckily got out of that, but you have Nadia saying, like, right, all that was BS. If I was really that person, why would I be helping you trying to take down Manticore? Why are you still alive? Wouldn't I kill you right here and now? But it's like, yeah, but there might be extenuating circumstances. Once again, there might be some leverage being used against you. There's just definitely even more you're hiding from him. I'm just not sure what and why. And for him, it's like he doesn't really have anyone else he can work with in this moment. But it's like, how do I trust someone I don't know if I can really trust? You know? And I think it's going to probably eventually, well, I don't know if it's going to turn it, I was about to say, like, not unless it turns into a situation of, like, right, you can't trust other people, but how do you know you can even trust yourself? I mean, especially with your life becoming unraveled the way it is. It's like, there's a whole you and Nadia thing, but, you know, you don't know this yet, but obviously the whole truth about who Abby really is. Because she definitely would have been a Citadel agent around the time Nadia and Mason were, but they might have ever interacted. I mean, it just depends on like how new she was, and maybe they did interact. I mean, Nadia hasn't seen Abby's face yet, so if she sees Abby, then it'll probably correlate. Wait, I know who she is, you know. So maybe that it's probably someone they both interacted with a long time ago, because her accident was like a year before the situation that led to both of them getting backstopped as well. That's the big thing, though. Why was Abby backstopped? If that was the case, maybe it wasn't. At least in Nadia and Mason's case, it's because Citadel was falling, but her circumstances predated that. So maybe it has something to do with Anders. Maybe they kind of had to, like, quote unquote, recall her to some extent for something. I don't know. So many questions. We have Bernard at the end telling Anders the truth and say, I can take you to her. So, I mean, it's how he gets to his family is by also taking him to Abby, and maybe this in turn will push Anders into situations where he will switch sides or something. I don't know. Bernard's got some play, so we'll have to ultimately wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.